Kenya is a maritime country with a coastline of over 600 kilometers long, consisting of several islands, navigable channels, and fascinating attractions such as historical monuments, wonderful marine life, and beautiful beaches. It is also the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to undertake an underwater archaeological expedition in recognition of the underwater cultural heritage that is largely unexploited and lying under its ocean.
Underwater cultural heritage is one of the most important ecosystem areas that our government is very interested in, particularly because we have a coastline that is of great value globally and also strategically. And there has been a lot of work now to try and improve the knowledge around this, but also trying, and therefore we are doing surveying and documentation to establish the scope of the wealth and prosperity that is within our underwater ecosystem. There is capacity building to try and increase the number of Kenyans that are engaged in the underwater world. There is an effort to collaborate with other countries and institutions of the world that have been doing this. And in fact, as part of this, we are going to have the exhibition during the Blue Economy to grow the knowledge around the underwater cultural heritage.
This coast forms part of the West Indian Ocean, commonly referred to as Swahili Coast, for over 2,000 years. A major player in the ancient transoceanic maritime trade to India, China, Portugal, Arabia, and Indonesia, among others. Global maritime relationships were established that formed the basis for the development of majority of port cities in the 1st and 2nd millennia AD that are dotted along strategic locations on this coast. These cities include Mombasa, Lamu, Malindi, Mambrui, Vanga, and Pate, all being major tourist attractions.
National Museums of Kenya is a national institution that is charged with conservation, protection, and the conservation of national and cultural heritage. It is also an institution that is the national repository for all the scientific, cultural, historical, technological artifacts that are found in Kenya. So our main work is to protect those artifacts and also tell a tangible heritage like monuments, but also to do research on them and also disseminate that information to the Kenyan public so that the Kenyan public and the world can appreciate the importance of this material. One of those areas that we conduct research and also we collect information and artifact about is the heritage that is underwater. And underwater it could be either in the oceans, and we share, we have a long coastline in Kenya, or under lakes. We have a number of lakes, and there are certain heritage that is buried under those oceans. And so one of our work is to identify that buried heritage underwater, collect it if it's necessary, or preserve it in situ without removing it from the ocean, because they tell the story of this nation many millions of years ago.
Over the years, ships have sunk in the Indian Ocean, and today they sit under our ocean floor, some with their precious cargo and history, making Kenya a suitable location for the study and exploration.
Underwater cultural heritage entails the remains of humans that include things like shipwrecks, ancient buildings, cultural traditions that are likely to have been buried under the water. But we concentrate mostly on the shipwrecks, which have been sailing this coast for hundreds and hundreds of years. So over the years, National Museums of Kenya have been undertaking surveys and documenting and seeking to preserve these cultural heritage sites as part of the humanity of this country and as part of the important cultural heritage that deserves protection.
The acceptance of this study has been a relatively late development due to difficulties of accessing and working in underwater sites, and because the application of archaeology to underwater sites initially emerged from the skills and tools developed by shipwreck salvagers.
We have identified more than 40 shipwrecks in this coast, which we feel, apart from being underwater and also being of monumental value, they also contain very important history. And this cultural heritage is what many people have not come to realize, that it has got a lot of significance. So it relates with the traditions and the economies of the coast as well as the country, in which case these sites that are underwater can be developed and maximized and sustainably utilized for economic potential.
A variety of techniques have been used by divers to record findings underwater. Scale drawings is one of the basic tools of archaeology. Pencils are used to write underwater on permatrace, plastic dive slates, or matte laminated paper. Where intrusive underwater excavation is appropriate, silts and sediments can be removed from an area of investigation using a water dredge or airlift. When used correctly, these devices have an additional benefit intending to improve the visibility in the immediate vicinity of the investigation.
Underwater cultural heritage in Kenya is just starting to pick up. So far, we've identified about 40 plus underwater archaeological heritage areas, mainly within the coast of Kenya. Most of the concentrations are within Mombasa, where we have about 22 shipwrecks. Then when you go to Malindi, we have, I think, about 10, and then the rest are in Lamu. And as an institution, what we are trying to do is to make sure that this is well understood. And first and foremost, we have to document, because without knowing what you have, then you cannot be able even to preserve and take care of it. So the first aspect is mapping and making sure that we understand where all these underwater cultural heritage are within the coast of Kenya. And that is an undertaking that we are doing with other stakeholders, especially from people from outside, because within Kenya, I don't think we have any other institution which is undertaking underwater archaeological research. Then we are also looking at technological aspects, because for us to be able to preserve them, we also have to have the technology and the capacity to do it. So technologically, we are partnering, like for example, we are partnering with people from Italy in terms of bringing new technology, which can be able actually to identify where these shipwrecks are, even by just scanning on the surface and being able to know where they are. Then training our people, because right now we only have about 4 people who have been trained to do underwater archaeology. And this is an aspect that we want even to be undertaken within the curriculum, so that the youth can start now taking it up as a career.
Artifacts recovered from underwater sites need stabilization to manage the process of removal of water and conservation. They either need to be dried carefully or the water replaced with some inert medium. Artifacts recovered from salt water, particularly metals and glass, required to be stabilized following absorption of salt or leaching of metals. The Archaeology and Conservation Laboratory, based at the Fort Jesus Museum, is responsible for the stabilization, treatment, preservation, research, and the curation of artifacts recovered from sunken ships.
Our work here at the Conservation Laboratory involves conservation and preservation of materials. It was set up as a result of excavations from a 17th century Portuguese shipwreck that is sunk just directly here below Fort Jesus. When excavations were being done to salvage the ship, a lot of artifacts were brought up. These artifacts needed immediate conservation treatment. Hence, the need for an immediate conservation laboratory to be set up to cater for the needs of these collections. Collections, when excavated from one environment and then subjected to another environment, tend to deteriorate quickly if they are not given the proper care and treatment. Therefore, the conservation laboratory was important to conserve these collections so that they could be exhibited and also preserved for posterity.
Determining the proper treatment plan for each individual artifact is crucial, as using chemicals which are too harsh or improper for the material type can cause long-term damage. In addition to active conservation, the lab serves as a curation facility for more than 800 artifacts, and the staff manages an artificial loan program that encompasses over 1,000 artifacts.
With this development of opening up an underwater cultural heritage museum, we will have a lot of activities coming up. For example, researchers will be interested in coming to learn about the historic events of the ship that have been submerged. Educators will have an opportunity to study and present their findings on the shipwreck to the wider community. Local and international visitors will be able to come down and view for themselves aspects of the buried underwater cultural heritage.
The simplest approach to survey is to carry out three-dimensional surveying by divers using depth gauges and tape measurements. Where it is not practical or safe for divers to physically visit a site, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, enable observation and intervention with control by personnel located at the surface.
When you talk about underwater heritage, people think of those minerals or those metals, gold, copper, and there are so many treasure hunters out there. We've had a difficult time within actually some of the sites within the coast because people want to go there and pick whatever they can pick and then sell it illegally in the market. So treasure hunting is one of the things. Then there's also developments, like for example when you talk of lab set building of pots, we have to make sure that whatever is underground in the water is also taken care of. So if we do not identify where they are and do what we call heritage impact assessment, then they will be destroyed.
There is a deep-rooted purpose for underwater archaeology because it mainly protects and harnesses our blue economy involving rivers, lakes, oceans, etc., for the benefit of the economy and the support of our communities.
We would want, for example, in the long run, to develop a marine museum at the coast, working with the counties that are along the coast, Lamu, Tana River, and Mombasa, and Kwale, to develop a marine museum which doesn't exist in Kenya, to promote alternative tourism or additional, let me say not alternative, maybe additional attraction for tourists who come to the coast because they want to swim or they want to enjoy the beaches. So we think that also will be our contribution to the blue economy as an nation. And we have the capacity here. We have a little bit of it. You can see it in Nairobi Museum in terms of looking at the aquarium we have, but we would want to develop a full-scale marine museum at the coast with other partners who are interested.